Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I am Dr. Wen-chien, the Louis Halley Stone Chair of the East Asia Art at the Royal Ontario Museum. I'm delighted that you can join us for today's Curators Conversations on a digital program that explores themes and subjects from the Rang collections alongside the industrial professionals. I would like to take this opportunity to thank TD for their ongoing support of this program. I would also like to begin by acknowledging that Rang sits on what has been the ancestral lands of the Wanda, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, since the time immemorial to today. Sorry. So today's curator conversation celebrates a joint project with the University of Toronto researchers into the history of a 1,000-year-old Buddhist devotional print from Dunhuang, China. We will be answering some of your questions at the end of the program. So you are welcome to submit questions via the question Q&A feature on your screen. Now I'm joined by Professor Amanda Goodman from the Department of the Study of the Religion at the University of Toronto, and Dr. Jessica Lockhart, who is the head of the research of the Old Books New Science Lab, also at the U of T. So welcome, Amanda and Jessica.
Thanks for having us.
Allow me to call you by your first name.
Of course.
What brings us together for today's conversation is a piece of woodblock printed Buddhist devotional images that dates to the 10th centuries. Jessica, can I have the first slide? Yeah, this is great. So this piece on the screen is from the Rang collection. It actually came to the museum quite early in the 1927 from the British Museum in exchange for the Rang's 3 bronze belt hooks. One of them is on the screen right now. I only recently confirmed with their curator. I want to particularly thank the British Museum staff. They went into the museum particularly to take a photo for us during this very difficult pandemic time. Presumably, the British Museum had 2 copies of the Buddhist print, so they made exchange with us. Now we are very happy with this deal. I understand that this print draws Amanda's attention because your research take the manuscript from Dunhuang's, where this print also came from, as the evidence to study the transmission of the Buddhism, its teaching and the ritual during the 8th to 12th century, in particular in the regions between China and the Tibet. So you also have been involved in the Jessica's current team project, which is called The Book and the Silk Road, a 2-year international collaboration directed by Dr. Alexandra Gillespie from the University of Toronto at Mississauga and funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation. So to me, the most exciting part of this project is it links the study of the global history and the science. So in this particular case study of the Rang print on the screen, you can see one of the goals is to utilize modern science technologies to analyze the material sort of properties of the print and to see what it can reveal to us about many aspects surrounding the production of this print, and that we will talk in a moment. But first, let me briefly introduce to you the Chinese printing. As mentioned, this is Buddhist devotional print made around the 10th century. Indeed, the printing on paper was already invented in China around 700 AD. So woodblock printing was really a way of the mass producing images and text in the past. So on the screen, I put together a few modern photographs to give you some ideas how the woodblock printing is done. So basically you see a reversed design would be made first, and then be carved away by using tools such as the chisel or knives. As you can see the images on the right, on the left. And then the ink would be applied to the block. That's the images on the middle. And then you would press a piece of a paper or thinly onto it, and that's the images on the right, and then eventually peeled it away to produce an impression. And in this case, this master is actually making a traditional Chinese New Year woodblock print. So you can repeat this process to produce a lot of the prints. So the surviving early Chinese woodblock prints actually are mostly Buddhist prints. So Buddhism, as you may all know, was introduced from India to China almost 2 millennia ago. It indeed played a very crucial role in facilitating woodblock printing technologies. In particular, the religion really relied on sort of the mass production of the sacred texts and images to spread its beliefs, its faith, and also for the devotees to receive the blessings and the merits, etc. So today, the print we're discussing is actually one from the Chinese most famous Buddhist caves called the Mogao Caves at the Dunhuang city. So Amanda, as Dunhuang manuscripts are your research focus, could you give us a bit of background information about these cave temples in Dunhuang region, as well as its printing culture from the medieval time?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having us. It's so nice to be able to connect with you and the ROM community. And of course, to be here with Jess to talk about our collaboration through the Book in the Silk Roads project. So thank you. Yeah, so to answer your question about the historical background, I'm sure that many people watching are familiar with the beautiful ornate Buddhist temples that we find around the world today, whether that's in Taiwan or in Toronto. But what people might not know is that in the medieval period, some of the most spectacular Buddha shrines were actually constructed inside caves at key sites along the old Silk Roads. So here we have a map of Eurasia, and in the relief, we see the different trade routes mapped out here in red that sort of skirt the northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert and then the southern edge. So those are the northern and the southern Silk Roads. So these same trade routes were the routes across which Buddhism and other traditions made their way to China in the medieval period. Beginning in the first few centuries of the Common Era, we see a large network of Buddhist caves develop across the Silk Road region. So for example, you might be familiar with the Buddhist cave shrines in India at sites like Ajanta, or the Bamiyan Buddhist caves in Afghanistan. And in central China, we have the Yungang and Longmen cave sites. So the Mogao sites here on the map, they are identified as the Chen Fodong, or the Thousand Buddha Caves. And they're also known as the Dunhuang Caves because of their proximity to the nearby town of Dunhuang that's featured prominently on our map. Were part of this sort of extended Buddhist cave network. So the Dunhuang cave complex itself includes close to 500 caves and was an active site from the 4th to the 14th centuries. So for 1,000 years, Dunhuang was a center of the kind of cultural exchange that we might expect from a crossroads region, with monks and merchants and religious pilgrims passing through the site. So what's so striking about the Dunhuang caves, I think, is the condition of their decorated interiors today. So there's something like 45,000 square meters of painted wall murals preserved at the site, along with thousands of Buddhist statues, making it an important site for the study of Buddhist art and Buddhist social history. And today there's an academy on the site that studies the caves and their history, and Dunhuang is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means that they receive thousands or millions of visitors a year, depending on the website you check. Now, in one of the Dunhuang caves, the cave seen here on the left, which is identified as cave 16, and you can see the statuary there and the bundles of manuscripts, there was a hidden library. So maybe you can see the side chamber. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yeah, there was a secret side chamber. And inside there is a hidden library that contained tens of thousands of handwritten scrolls and books, along with hundreds of printed documents and decorative banners, portable paintings, and other ritual items that were used by everyday Buddhists. So in this picture on the right, we see the French scholar Paul Pelliot reading through the manuscript bundles inside the library cave. So Pelliot was part of a generation of scholars in the early 20th century who traveled to Dunhuang to collect the manuscripts. And of course, there's been a lot of debate over whether those scholars and the imperial missions that sent them had the right to take the documents from the site. Now, that said, it's interesting to note that the documents in the hidden library were written in more than a dozen languages, including Sanskrit, the classical language of India, Khotanese and Sogdian, both Eastern Iranian languages, and Old Uyghur, a Turkic language. So there's even a Jewish text written in Judeo-Persian and Iranian Jewish dialect that uses Hebrew script at the site. So it's pretty neat. Most of the manuscripts, though, and the ones that I study, are written in Chinese and Tibetan. And in fact, these are some of the earliest examples of Tibetan writing that we have anywhere. So this kind of gives you a sense of the real diversity of the traditions and languages that were represented at Dunhuang. And just to sort of follow up on your earlier point, Wen-chien, it is important to remember that print technology was already known in China by the 7th century, and that's several centuries earlier than we see in the West. And it's actually really remarkable that we have so many print documents preserved alongside the thousands of handwritten Dunhuang texts, including our ROM print. So it's an impressive collection of pre-modern materials.
So are you saying that the ROM print actually came directly from this hidden library in Dunhuang?
Yeah, so it was actually, it's somewhere in the rolls and bundles there. Possibly even, we're looking at it in the photograph of Paul Pelliot.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing. And it's more than 1,000-year-old. Thank you, Amanda. This is all very helpful for our audience to understand the historical context of the ROM print. As you are discussing about the Dunhuang caves, it reminds me of my first trip studying all these caves as a graduate student. You were also in the group together. We participated in the same Dunhuang site seminar, right? It was like 20 years ago. This piece of the print is more than 1,000-year-old. Can we have a next slide? As you can see, the print we're looking at actually has been maybe made by two blocks. As you can see, if the middle sort of lines in between these two blocks that's indicating the age of the block there. So the upper part of the block actually depicts an image of a bodhisattva who is sort of an enlightened and compassionate being in Buddhist concept. And in the lower part, you see an inscription. So Amanda, what can the image and text tell us specifically more about this print? For example, what was the occasion of producing this print? I assume that among many of them, do we know who commissioned it, its maker, and the function, etc.?
Yeah, so what makes this print so exciting and important, I think, is the astonishing amount of information that it provides. So based on the inscription that you pointed out, we know that this object was commissioned by the governor of Dunhuang, Governor Cao Yuanzhong, during what's called the Midsummer Ghost Festival in the year 947. So this is a document from 947 CE. And as the viewers might know, the Ghost Festival was and is one of the most important annual holidays in China, a sort of celebration of this ancient festival called the Festival of the Hungry Ghosts. The celebration lasts a full month in either July or August. And based on historical records, we know that the residents of Dunhuang in 947 would have gathered together to make offerings to the local Buddhist temples on behalf of their ancestors during this month. And there would have been a lot of decorations and food stalls and street markets and parades. So there would have been a really vibrant festival atmosphere. And it's significant that the print that we're looking at, and here we see a translation of the inscription found in the lower text block, It's significant that it was commissioned on the full moon, which is the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, according to the inscription, because this is at the height of the festival. So meaning that Governor Cao, who commissioned this print, made his poster so that it would be displayed across the city and perhaps even in private households on the most important day of the summer holidays. So as we can see from the translation of the Chinese inscription, Governor Cao's poster is careful to acknowledge the local city god, and in it he expresses his hopes for a peaceful and prosperous year ahead for the whole Dunhuang region. Another really fascinating detail found at the end of the inscription, if we can go back, is where we can see the name of the individual who actually carved the wood block that was used to make the sheet. And here we see the name of a fellow, you might not be able to see it so closely, but a figure by the name of Lei Yanmei. And Jessica and I in our research have sort of been able to trace his name across other printed documents at Dunhuang. And so we found at least 4 other collaborations that he did with Governor Cao. For example, they printed up copies of a famous Buddhist text called the Diamond Sutra. And so there are 4 copies of that printing collaboration extant in Dunhuang Cave 17 as well. So there's really a lot of variety that we see. So based on our research, we know that the Ram print is one of a set of devotional prints commissioned by Governor Cao, and an even broader set of printed materials that he was responsible for, that were all carved by the same engraver. So miraculously, all of these early prints have been preserved. So in just this one sample, we get a real neat snapshot of daily life in Dunhuang during the 10th century. And it really tells us a lot, or raises a lot of interesting questions about the relationship between the local rulers and the local Buddhist community. And it also tells us a lot about the deities who were popular at the site. And in this case, as you mentioned, we see in the upper register the image Guanyin or Avalokiteshvara, a prominent bodhisattva at the site. And it even gives us information about the local workshops who were producing images like the one we see on the screen today. So it's a very rich document for Buddhist historical knowledge.
Yes, that's great. I feel like we all need this print at the moment. I mean, during this pandemic time, we need some blessings.
Yeah, that the diseases may disappear.
Yeah. It's amazing how much
evildoers.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's amazing how much we can already learn just from the text and the images.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the important part of this project is the laboratory analyst. So Jessica, I remember it was about maybe 1.5 years ago, right? Around 2019 October, when you first came to run with your sampling kit. And you did some lab work to study the print with the help from the 2 RUN staff, Janet Cohen, the RUN paper conservator, and Gwen Adam, the RUN Asia collection technicians. So can you tell us what the laboratory work has been done at the RUN and what have you discovered so far?
Yeah, absolutely. And first I want to give a shout out to Janet Cohen and Gwen Adams for their incredible hospitality and generosity in facilitating that research visit. It was a real highlight of my year. I had already been in love with this project, and then after visiting with them, it's been just really transformative. So basically what we've been doing is trying to use a variety of non-destructive scientific analytic techniques and imaging methods to try to learn about what happened to this particular leaf in the course of its history. So we've been really interested in who might have owned and preserved this page after the festival, to the point that it showed up in the cave. And in order to start to unpack that kind of question, we need to find out how it was used. So first I want to though back up to something that Amanda said, which is that there have been that there isn't just one of these leaves that survived. Like picture that. I mean, it's from 947. We actually have like something like 32 copies of devotional prints that would have been displayed at that time.
Yeah,
32. And the Mogao Caves was sealed around 1002, we think. So the Ram leaf circulated in the community for 5 decades without getting thrown out, before it wound up at that point, and then stayed in the cave for 1,000 years, and then moved to Britain and then to Canada in the 20th century. So it's got a really interesting life about it. And so one of the great things about our work with the ROM is that we've been able to use some of the ROM's facilities, as well as collaborations with the Beasts to Craft group in Cambridge, UK, in order to sort of validate suspicions that we might have had about the physical evidence that's present on the leaf, and also to discover new things. So let me just show you a little bit. Here are some examples of the other copies of this print that have survived. And what I love about these is that they're all so different from the ROM one. Like the closest one is maybe this one, which is currently in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and it's much more deteriorated, though it has some similar sort of oil stains and accumulations to what we see on the ROM leaf. But you can see that this one was made into a banner, and somebody augmented it and hung it. This one, they decided to add paint. This one, I think it was torn, and so they added a piece of recycled paper to fix the margins on it. And this one is my favorite. They were like, the festival is past, but Guanyin is forever. So they trimmed off the 947 thing and just created this incredibly impressive large banner of images of the Bodhisattva Guanyin. So anyway, it's been really neat. But so with the ROM's help, in particular, this image on the right you see was taken by Gwen Adams using a digital microscope, and it has been able to demonstrate that some of these holes that you see around the edges of the leaf, and in particular, I think these 3 holes at the top and these bottom 2 at the bottom, and I suspect there was one over here that got destroyed. These are actually puncture marks from nail holes. So these little bits, these holes probably happened to the leaf within the first few days of its existence. But it's really remarkable how well this leaf has survived, and yet there's still some really interesting sort of subtle physical signs of what has happened to it in this time. So on this, you can see that there's a lot of oil that falls into sort of 3 general patterns corresponding to how the leaf was rolled up. We've got folds, we've got the nail holes, and one of my favorites is that we actually have signs that of heated oil, which has a discoloration effect. So yeah, so I don't know what to tell you.
Do you think the combination of the different stains and the nail holes means that these were hung up possibly in private homes near kitchens, or any kind of speculation?
Yeah, so I think that this one in particular was definitely indoors, as opposed to some of the other ones that we see that are heavily water damaged and quite faded. Yeah, I think that this one was nailed up inside somewhere, whether that in a temple or in a private home. And that after the festival, somebody carefully took it down and preserved it amongst their papers. And you can tell this because on the back, you can see that there are sort of 3 general, like it was folded into thirds, and then at some point later it was rolled up and sort of crushed a little bit. But you see these different accumulations of what looks, we're just calling it an accretion right now because we are still trying to figure out what it is. But they sort of fall along this area that would have been exposed. So I think that these oil stains primarily happened to it after it was already rolled up and in storage, whether in somebody's, and I think in storage in somebody's private home. But you can see in some of the other examples that it's heavily oil stained in a way that makes it, that probably happened to it while it was on display near a flame of some kind. So
wow, this is all very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we really learned a lot. But I'm sorry that time really goes
Oh, of
by
course.
fast. Just
Yeah.
we are having very engaging the conversation. I hate to stop, but I would want to leave time for Q&A. We haven't learned so much about this print, but I think our audience might have some questions as well. So let's open for the Q&A. And if you haven't typed in your question, please, you can do so if you have any questions. Where, I think Amanda can answer this. Where is the hidden cave library exactly?
Yeah, so it's actually a side chamber in one of the central cave shrines. So the central shrine to which the cave library is attached is identified again as cave 16. So we refer to the hidden library cave as cave
Oh.
17. So it's a sort of secret little repository that was walled up at a certain point with all of these manuscripts and print documents and other kinds of ritual ephemeral objects. Sometime in the first decade of the 11th century. And this is the big mystery of the Dunhuang Library Cave. We don't know exactly why we have the materials that are in the cave there. And we're not entirely sure why they walled it up. Yeah, it's a big mystery.
There's another question maybe Amanda can also answer. Any relationship to the family of Cao Cao, as you mentioned, this Cao, local governor, or the Cao, one of the three kingdoms? Do you know?
I don't think so, but I don't know. But I mean, we do know quite a lot about the ruling family of Dunhuang and the larger region at this time. And so we have several generations of Cao clan members who were ruling what's called the Guiyijun period, the return to righteousness garrison that was stationed around the modern city of Dunhuang. So it was many Caos, but I don't think it's those Caos. Yes.
Okay. Someone asked, will the print be displayed in the ROM? That's a very good question. Potentially, this print might be displayed, but probably not at the ROM, but and another institute, because it's not finalized yet, so I'm not going to announce yet, but this is also part of the book and circular projects, right?
It's going to be really good if it happens.
Yeah, it's going smoothly. It will have a chance to be displayed, and certainly we will promote and let everybody knows. Yeah, it would be excited to see the real object.
It's so exciting that it's here in Toronto.
Yeah.
So far as we know, it's the only document from Dunhuang that's in Canada, and it's really special that it's here. I just go through life thinking like, you know, here I live in North Toronto, and like a few kilometers away is this like 1,100-year-old print that is just like grimly held on happily through its existence, entirely unchanged.
Okay, so there's a question about the what material was used to manufacture paper at the time?
Yeah, I can answer that one. There's some of it is, most of the Dunhuang papers are sort of called rag paper, but what that really means is that they were a combination of like hemp fibers and something called ramier, and some of them were made of mulberry bark as well, or other fibers like that. So we've looked at this one under a microscope, and there are little wood chip inclusions in the paper. So I think it was a mix. But there's a big variety actually of Dunhuang paper qualities, but this one is a kind of relatively cheap, but you know, still nice paper. So
okay, so can maybe one of you talk a little about the cult of the Guanyin and her relationship to this Hunger Ghost Festival in July?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And I think there's another one from Bali Yang, which is about the sort of gender identity of the figure Guanyin, who sort of undergoes this kind of reorientation in China. Well, what's really interesting is that there's not necessarily a connection between Guanyin and the Ghost Festival. So it's sort of a little bit up in the air as to just why the Cao clan or Governor Cao Yuanzhong himself decided, or was it the engraver who decided to match this sort of inscription commemorating this high holiday with the picture of Guanyin? And there's a little secret that Jess and I haven't told you about, which is that there's actually a second print with a different deity commissioned by Cao Yuanzhong for this same holiday and the same year, which has a deity named Vaishravana, who is a sort of more wrathful looking deity, a kind of guardian type deity. So we not only see Guanyin being attached to this festival through these posters, but also Vaishravana, another deity. So no necessary connection, but it sort of gets you thinking about the community that, or the sort of devotional qualities of these deities and their, maybe the personal relationship that the Cao family had with each of these deities. So it just raises more questions. In terms of the sort of gender identity of Avalokiteshvara or Guanyin here, it's sort of up in the air. Now we can't really tell, although we might speculate. A rather feminine looking image, and the inscription is quite interesting, and so are the cartouches that appear. So there's lots of sort of art historical questions that we could ask of Guanyin for sure.
Maybe I can add that I feel like the female transformation of the Guanyin really happened more sort of toward the Song dynasty. So in this early stage, in probably that particular element is still not so strong yet. I think it's more sort of the Chinese sort of pilgrims kind of tales about Guanyin. They appear in the devotees' visions, appear as a female that help to transform the this particular sort of bodhisattva's gender into the female. So theoretically, there shouldn't be a gender at all applied to So there are quite a few other questions. Two of you can jump in. You feel like a proper to answer any of them. I wonder, are we able to know how many copies approximately can be made from each block? I think that's a challenging question to answer, right?
Yeah, there could have been hundreds, there could have been thousands. A wood block can do, 40,000 prints easily. It's an incredibly powerful print technology.
Exactly, yeah.
So we don't know. But the fact that like 30 odd of them survived 50 years amongst, it's that to me suggests that there were tons. But I mean, who knows?
Also like a block could last for decades. Can be used for a long time. Yeah.
And one of the possibilities about the fact that it was two different blocks is that the Guanyin block would have been, it wouldn't have been dated in the same way that the text block was. Right. So it could have been reused for other design needs and other prints after the fact. We just haven't found them yet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting questions that remains when we see the collage of just the Guanyin images, just the image block put together. Does that mean they cut it apart from the text block, or did it circulate separately and was used for its own purposes? It's such a cool question.
And this is where we want to look at the paper. Like I would love to see that thing in person, because the ones that we have been able to see, the paper is identical between the Vaishravana and the Avalokiteshvara. So we know that they were using the same stock, which is just really cool.
So Amanda, there's a very interesting question about, are there still any remaining materials in the cave 17, or they were all taken by the, Western explorers in late, 20th century, 18th century, etc.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything literally left unless it's sort of there for sort of display or exhibition purposes on the site. Although there is an academy and a library there where scholars are continuing to do work on the manuscripts and of course all the art historical material there. But most of the manuscripts were removed by a series of missions. So the British library collection was done by Sir Aurel Stein, and he took tens of thousands of manuscripts out. Paul Pelliot took a lot of manuscripts out, and a lot were left, but a lot of fragments were left. So the National Library in Beijing has a lot of Dunhuang materials, but they're really scattered around the world. We have some in Taiwan, Japan, America. So they really did a number on Cave 17 back in the early 20th century. But because it's become such an important historical site, And it's part of a sort of the attempt to sort of reconstruct the sort of Silk Road heritage. There's really a lot on the site today that you can go and see and learn from. So nothing left in the cave, but lots of stuff around the cave to use to think about what it would have been and what it meant.
Yeah, I remember when we were there. There has been a lot of protection already started, and they're kind of worried about even the visitors breathe, and it's going to damage the mural paintings, etc. I think one of the reasons that all these materials, the manuscripts, can be preserved for such a long time in the Mogao caves is because the climate, right? It's a desert, kind of very dry and hot. Remember how hot was there in the summertime.
Yes.
But then luckily, all this manuscript were preserved for 1,000 years.
Yeah, if anybody in the audience wants to keep something around for posterity, just take it somewhere really hot and dry and leave it there.
Dry.
Yes.
I'm really interested by all the questions in the comments about the different instruments that we're talking about. So the nails and when we think about the manuscripts, we have the woodblock, and we also think about things like brushes and pens that were used to sort of create these documents. It's a set of really interesting questions. Just, I don't know, have you done any investigation on what nails are and what nails are made of at this period? I don't know if we know if we've gotten that far yet.
We haven't gotten that far yet. But I feel that the audience has been cheated by you not telling them that there are still hooks hanging up in the caves. Can you tell them about that?
Yeah, so one of the things, I don't know if you remember this, Wen-chien, but as you tour through the different cave shrines at Dunhuang, you see all sorts of evidence like we see on these printed sheets, right? So we have oil stains and holes and all sorts of other sort of markers that these things were used and displayed in different ways. And within some of the cave shrines, you have altars, right? And a Buddha statue with his attendants. And above the altar, you often will find metal rings attached to the top where they would hang banners from. And you'll also see soot marks on the roofs of the cave shrines because they would burn oil lamps inside of the caves when they were performing rituals according to the annual festival calendar. So there's quite a lot of material evidence about Buddhist activities at the site, not just the Buddhist art and the Buddhist manuscript. So I think that that's a really nice thing to keep in mind when trying to figure out what these marks on the paper documents might represent, might actually represent Buddhist practice.
Yeah. So any other question, Amanda or Jessica, you want to respond to? There's so many.
I see one about the book of the Silk Roads project. So I just want to do a little brief shout out to that. So it is a project whose goal is to connect experts and scientists and community members and the guardians of particular heritage artifacts in a network to allow people to mutually study global book history together. And so people will send us a message saying, we have this manuscript, we don't know what it is. We will look at it, look at an image of it, we'll connect it to the Syriac scholar or the Kashmiri scholar or whatever who can inform us. And we also link to scientists who can help to push some of these questions a little bit further. So, in this time where we're all separated, it's a really wonderful research community that allows us to feel connected and to answer some of these questions together. So it's a really exciting project. And it's really a great privilege to be part of.
Okay, I think we're kind of running out of time. Maybe we'll just take one more question as our last question.
Amanda, do you want to answer the literacy one? That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating question. Yeah, no, so the question is what percentage of the population would have been literate and using these prints at the time of their production? And would these types of materials only been available to certain strata of society? We don't have any sort of hard numbers about that, but we do know that there's a fairly high level of literacy, relatively speaking. And we have other kinds of documents that sort of show us this. Now, we have what are called sort of lay Buddhist association circulars that we've recovered from Dunhuang cave 17, the hidden library cave. So we get lists of names of people who are parts of the Buddhist community at Dunhuang, and they're writing different kinds of things. And sometimes they're only writing their name, but sometimes they're writing down the kinds of offers that they've made and so forth and so on. So there is a relative degree of literacy. And so I'm not entirely sure that everyone in the town of Dunhuang could read the entire inscription, but its overall significance would have been clear to just about everybody, I think. So
one of the things that I really love about the documents that have been found along the Silk Roads is that these ephemeral documents from people's writing activity do survive. So like in Turfan, for instance, there were funeral shoes that were discovered that were made out of old students' examination papers. And you can see the students writing and the teacher's grade, whether like pass or fail. And I just, it's so exciting to have that connection with people just living their lives way back when. Yeah.
Great. Sorry to stop everybody here. Our time is pretty much up. So unfortunately, we have to stop now. But before we leave, I'd like to thank again Amanda and Jessica for having a great conversation with me and also for sharing your wonderful research. So thank you so much also for everyone who joins us for today's talk, the conversations. So hope to see you in our next round event. So goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.